Okay, hi everyone, HPM 641 students. Welcome back. We're in week 5A now. So we're going to talk about process theories of motivation this week. So, in the background, if you hear any like music or any like, weird sound and so on, it's probably my son, okay? And, my son playing piano now, and, my wife is screaming at him sometimes. So, um, don't be surprised if you hear this, okay? Anyway, for us, okay, we are going to learn something about motivation and also my voice. My voice is a little bit different now because I think I caught a cold. But anyway, so let's move on. We are going to learn about process theories of motivation. Basically, this is a continuation of our content theories of motivation. We now want to think about motivation in a slightly more complex way, okay? Instead of just thinking about, a motivator, lead to behaviors, which is kind of pretty simple relationship. We, in the content theory, we basically, we just identify the motivators, right? Something, a reward, is higher salary, or, something, that has value to a person. We use it as a motivator, and then we think that that motivator is going to lead to certain desirable behavior, right? Our, so relationship and our, thinking about the motivation and the behavior is a little bit simplistic, okay, in the content theories. Now, which doesn't mean that it's not useful, okay? We still use a lot of Maslow theory and, other theories about motivation. But no, this week we're talking about motivation more as a psychological process, okay? And that's why in this week's slide deck, you will see more diagrams, which kind of like, show you, illustrate how the psychological process actually works, and kind of think about the motivation and behavior more as a process, okay? So we're going to talk about several different theories in the process theory, kind of feel, and we have the expectancy theory, and which is about how this theory, and also how this the various components of this theories, and how they impact an individual's level of motivation, okay? We have the equity theory, which kind of says that people want to be treated fairly. Okay, if they think that their reward is not fair, right, then it will generate a certain tension within their mind, and they want to resolve this tension. We will also talk about three other theories: the satisfaction performance theory, which is an extension of the expectancy theory and equity theory. The goal setting theory changes gear a bit, talk about why goal setting is important. And finally, we have the reinforcement theory, started from, psychologist B.F. Skinner, and how this different, how this different reinforcement, will lead to, certain behavioral change, okay? Now, the first one, the expectant theory, sometimes also called the expectancy VIE theory. VIE stands for, it's a sort of a big word standing for three different components in this theory: valence, instrumentality, and also, one other thing in the theory, which, let me see this one, I forget it now. Sorry, it's just the expectancy, okay? Now, so for any given situation, expectancy theory says that, a person's motivation, is sort of depends on, his or her desire for that particular outcome. So that says that the outcome, is expected, and but the outcome is not necessarily desirable, okay, or desired, right, by the individual, okay. Sometimes the individuals might simply want to avoid that outcome to realize, okay, and so this is there's a kind of a more complex way to think about the psychological process, right? Now, the individual has this expectancy about what he does or she does, okay? And the individual performance is then perceived to be related to its attainment of that desired outcomes or the avoidance of that negative outcomes, right? And there's a certain perceived probability that the efforts, right, that the individual expand will lead to that require performance, or how that performance will lead to the outcome. Now, this expectancy is developed by this theoretical rooms, and the VIE theory is try to talks about the psychological process in a slightly more complex way than our content theories last time, right? It has this motivation, this valence, okay, the strength of this desire to achieve that desired outcome, okay. And so the end of this motivation is a certain reward or the certain outcome, okay. But before this motivation emerges, and the final outcome, there's many things inside, okay. Um, the individual perceive that the efforts that he or she puts in will eventually lead to the outcome, okay. So there's a certain expectancy here about how this effort has the chance to lead to the performance required to achieve this outcome. And then whether this performance then is definitely related to this final reward. So you can think about this in a actual situation, like in a health care organization, when a nurse or another employee, they think that, well, if he or she works hard, eventually there will be this reward, which might come in terms of a recognition, a bonus, increased salary, and increased autonomy, and so on. But you notice that the individual also pay attention to each of the step, right? Whether the effort is significantly related to this performance, so there's this expectancy here, and also whether the performance will eventually associate with the reward, okay? Again, and also in the more complex version of this theory, there's also the possibility of whether the individual necessarily want to achieve that reward or not. For example, the reward might be job promotion. So a higher performance has the instrumental function to lead to a job promotion. However, some individuals, some employees might not want that to happen at the end, right? So there might be some motivations to purposefully lower the performance. Okay, so the expectancy theory is a very good first example to help illustrate that the psychological process, through which the motivation leads to the final outcome is more complex, right, than the contents theory. And we're going to talk about the other theories that maybe that talks about this process in a slightly different direction. Now, this is just an extension of the expectancy theory, and I'm not going to spend too much time, but I encourage you to read. The extension is here, okay? It has these 9 different C: challenge, capability, confidence, cost, compensation, credibility, consistency, and also criteria and communications. This last part here, that for managers, is particularly important. It is an extension of this theory to say that, well, if you pay attention to these 9 different C's here, okay? You can change expectancy and instrumental mentality, okay? Associated with this theory, okay? It is an extension, for example, for the managers, criteria and communication is very important because the managers needs to communicate this criteria that the employee can expect to be associated with certain outcome, right? So for managers, this is what they need to do. Okay, so these 9 C's, in the lower part of this extended diagram is more of an applied perspective of this theory. Okay, so I encourage you to look at this. Maybe you can discuss this in the discussion forum. Now, I want to keep going and talk more about these different types of theories. Okay, another theory is called equity theory. Okay, the equity theory states that a person evaluates his or her outcomes and inputs by comparing them with those of others. So instead of thinking about a certain intrinsic relationship between outcomes and input, right, or the job efforts, right? An individual is more likely to compare himself or herself with other employees because everyone has this sense of fairness in the mind, and they want to be treated fairly instead of just doing on their own. Okay, so the equity theories sort of emphasize that people want this fairness in a job situation. Fairness is important. Okay, now so in this diagrams developed by this theorist Adams is very useful. Okay, so it says that inputs and output and outcomes has a certain relationship. Okay, so my inputs is probably anything related to myself, my education, experience, age, the work that I put in the job, and so on. Okay, and this is my outcomes, my salary, promotion, bonus, job freedom, autonomy, and everything. This is my part. Okay, my inputs over my outcomes. Okay, now what the equity basically suggests is that job in a job situation, in a work situation, employees want this quotient here, if you like, to be equal with others, okay, in terms of their quotient, okay. So if they put in the similar output, their outcome should be similar, okay, and so everyone should be equal, okay. Now, of course, it depends, if someone has a higher input, and maybe the outcome should also be higher, right? But the employee or the person himself will try to evaluate this. We try to think about whether this is fair. Okay, and this is later the sort of crux of this equity theory here. Now, the interesting part about the equity theory is, of course, the equity. What exactly is equity? Is a matter of perception, right? So that's why we talk about perception in earlier class. Okay, when an equity is perceived by an individual, it creates, I mean, when an inequity is perceived, it creates a tension with the person. The person thinks that, well, this is not fair, right? I, put in so much work and my outcome is not so good, okay? But, another individual might have, less input, but with a higher in outcome. Okay, so it's not proportional. Okay, so the tension is generated. Okay, and the theory actually suggests further that the tension is proportional to the degree of inequity. So the more unfair the perceived situation is, right, the more higher level of tension the individual will experience. So the tension itself becomes a motivation then, right? But the motivation might kind of be a bit different from the motivation that we've been talking about so much. The individual, him or her, would like to relieve this tension by addressing it, right? By maybe talking to the manager, by voicing this. Sometimes it might just make the individual work even harder, or create certain tension that motivates the person to do something. Okay, And the strength of this motivation will be reduced, okay, if the perceived inequity is relieved, okay. Now, so this theory has a certain like practical implication here, right? Because from the manager's point of view, it's always important to resolve this tension within individuals among the staff. Okay, there are several ways of doing this. This is a summary of this. Again, you should really read the book to understand this. But basically, the manager can alter inputs, outcomes, or kind of actually distort, okay, this inputs or outcome, okay. Cognitively distortion, meaning that, people need to kind of like rethink about the relationship, okay. It might be, done by the employee himself or herself, or the manager might have to facilitate, that type of cognitive distortion, okay. Leaving the field is a kind of drastic, extreme way of resolving the tension. Changing or distorting inputs or outcomes of the comparison is the other for the other person or for the comparison group, okay, or changing the comparison altogether, okay. So these are all the different ways that the managers can do. For example, the last one, maybe changing, putting the employee in a different department will change the comparison altogether, right? So this might be one way that the manager can resolve the tension. But again, you should think about other ways that you can resolve this tension if inequity is perceived in a job situation. Now, let me see how much more thing. Okay. Okay, now let's see how much we can go. I don't want to go too much in one video though. Okay, now the third theory is called the satisfaction performance theory. Okay, and this theory is a further extension of the expectancy theory and also the equity theory. Okay, it talks about ultimately what an employee needs is to get that job satisfaction, right? And how this job satisfaction and the performance is related, okay. And and this is kind of a very applied way of thinking about motivation. Now, first of all, we want to think about how does job satisfaction come about. How do people satisfy when become happy from their jobs, right? It can be the performance itself. Okay, if you know that your performance is great, is excellent, then you will be happy about your job. The reward for your performance is high. If you have a high paid job, high salary, a lot of autonomy and a lot of control, okay, so you will also be happy. And finally, if you think that what you get from the job is comparable, is fair, okay, so you have a sense of perceived equitability of those rewards, compared with others, right? So you will get this job satisfaction. Now, if that's the case, okay, so then according to Porter and Lawler, okay, their satisfaction performance motivation model, we can think about the satisfaction performance um, relationship in a model, as you can see on the slide. First of all, satisfaction is our end goal here, okay? Performance is in the some in between, okay? It's the kind of like the link, to the final job satisfaction, okay? First of all, the thinking began, right? The value of the reward and the perceived effort to get that reward, okay, and the probability, okay, started, okay, is on the 1 and 2 here. And once this thinking started, right, the individual will put in certain effort, right, to try to achieve that final goals, okay. And of course, this effort, from the effort to the performance, it is moderated by the person's abilities and traits. Okay, is the person persistent enough? Is the person's have the required skills level and the knowledge to perform the job? Okay, the role perceptions, whether the person plays his or her role appropriately. Okay, this all will lead to a certain outcome of performance and accomplishment. Okay, now this performance is only as intermediate step. Okay, because performance itself can have an intrinsic reward. Okay, the person himself or herself will know whether he does a good job or not. Sometimes you will feel very rewarding, right, just because you did a job well. Extrinsic reward, okay, and you get recognition from your supervisor, from your peers, maybe even from your subordinates if you are in a kind of managerial position. Okay, these are all the rewards associated with the performance. And then there's this perceived equitable rewards. You think that all these rewards here are fair. Okay, everyone has a similar level of rewards because of the performance accomplished, and that way it will finally generate the right level of satisfaction. Okay, and satisfaction will eventually go back to the value of reward, as a cycle, right? So this is basically the psychological process underlying the satisfaction performance motivation model developed by Porter and Lawler. I think, let me see. Let's take a break here. Okay, I don't want to make one video too long. Let's take a break here. Okay, and when we come back, we'll talk about two additional process theories of motivation, and then we can have another video about attribution of this of the psychological process. Okay, so let's take a break first.